I stood outside the kitchen of our Nashville estate, listening to my parents and sister divide my holiday into unpaid babysitting and catering shifts. Nobody asked my opinion. I was just a folding table, dragged out for their convenience. Anger wasn't loud. It was clinical. I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon regret, but found only a clear balance sheet. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I walked quietly away from the kitchen and out the front door. The crisp December air hit my face, but I felt absolutely nothing. For years, I had operated under a flawed contract. My family engaged in a systematic normalization of cruelty, treating my time, my editing career, and my autonomy as communal property. Every time I landed a new remote editing contract, my mother, Margaret, would simply smile and ask if I could still pick up my niece from school. My father, Arthur, treated my deadlines as suggestions, while my sister Beatrice viewed my presence as a free premium subscription to a nanny service. I had allowed this normalization to take root. I had accepted their constant debits from my emotional bank account as the standard cost of doing business with my own blood. I thought I was simply being a good daughter and a supportive sister. In reality, I was wearing the invisible chains of a survivor. I suffered from a profound case of learned helplessness, a psychological trap where you stop fighting because every previous attempt to assert a boundary was met with overwhelming guilt trips and coordinated family backlash. But tonight, listening to them appropriate the next 2 weeks of my life, the chain simply snapped. I didn't cry. I didn't march into the kitchen to demand an explanation or an apology. Arguing with them would be a poor investment of my energy. They weren't interested in a negotiation. They only wanted compliance. I opened the door to my sedan, slid into the driver's seat, and locked the doors. The silence inside the car was the sound of a closing account. I pulled out my phone and dialed my best friend, Audrey. She answered on the second ring. "I need an exit strategy," I told her, my voice completely devoid of emotion. Audrey didn't ask questions. She knew the balance sheet of my family dynamics better than anyone. "I am looking at the last available seat on a flight to St. Augustine, Florida, departing tomorrow morning," Audrey said. "Do I book it?" "Book it," I replied instantly. "Send me the invoice." The transaction was complete in under 4 minutes. I was officially scheduled to fly out of Nashville on Christmas morning. There was no hesitation. There was no panic or despair. I leaned my head against the steering wheel and felt the cold, methodical rhythm of a power flip. I had been the silent investor in their version of family, consistently footing the bill for their convenience while receiving zero returns. They relied on my passivity to subsidize their perfect holiday aesthetic. St. Augustine would be warm, quiet, and miles away from their jurisdiction. I would spend my holiday walking on the beach instead of scrubbing their roasting pans. Retaliation requires precision, and I was about to execute a flawless withdrawal. My phone began to buzz incessantly as soon as I walked into my apartment. It was the family group chat titled Holiday Joy 2026. I opened the application and watched the messages roll in with clinical detachment. Beatrice had uploaded a meticulously color-coded spreadsheet. It detailed the entire holiday schedule, broken down into 30-minute increments. My name, Clara, was stamped across every undesirable time slot. Clara prepares the Christmas Eve dinner. Clara watches the children while Beatrice and Julian attend the evening gala. Clara handles the cleanup. Clara manages the morning breakfast spread. Margaret followed up with a barrage of heart emojis. "Thank you, Clara. This is going to save us so much money on catering and childcare this year. We are so blessed to have such a helpful girl." Arthur chimed in, praising Beatrice for her excellent organizational skills while completely ignoring the fact that the entire schedule relied on my unpaid labor. They were celebrating a massive profit margin built entirely on my exploitation. I didn't type a single word in response. I simply took a screenshot of every message, every schedule, every demand. This wasn't just a group chat. It was a ledger of their entitlement. I saved the images into a secure folder on my phone. Evidence is the cornerstone of any successful audit, and I was preparing for a comprehensive review. Next, I walked into my bedroom and pulled my suitcase from the closet. Packing was an exercise in efficiency. I didn't pack thick sweaters or formal dresses for my family's traditional dinners. I packed lightweight clothing, sandals, and swimsuits. I packed my laptop and my professional editing materials, ensuring my actual career could continue uninterrupted from the Florida coast. My movements were precise, stripped of any sentimental hesitation. I folded each item, recognizing that I was packing up my independence. After my suitcase was zipped and locked, I turned my attention to the stack of wrapped presents sitting in the corner of my living room. I had spent hundreds of dollars and hours of my time selecting perfect gifts for Margaret, Arthur, Beatrice, Julian, and my nieces and nephews. Previously, I would have hand-delivered them, eager to see their fleeting smiles before they returned to ignoring me. Now, they were merely physical assets that needed to be relocated. I gathered the boxes, placed them into a large shipping carton, and taped it shut. I printed a shipping label addressed to my parents' estate. I didn't include a heartfelt card. I didn't include a note explaining my absence. Explanations are for people who respect you, and my family only respected my utility. I scheduled a courier pickup for the following morning. The gifts would arrive exactly on time, sitting on their doorstep like silent witnesses to my departure. I surveyed my apartment. Everything was in order. My flight departed at 7 in the morning. I set my alarm for 4, plugged my phone into the charger, and lay down in the dark. My heart rate was slow and steady. There was no anxiety keeping me awake. I had audited my life, identified the toxic liabilities, and was taking immediate action to balance the scales. My alarm sounded at exactly 4 in the morning. I woke up immediately, my mind clear and focused. Today was Christmas morning, a day historically reserved for my family's chaotic demands and my quiet exhaustion. But today, the schedule was entirely my own. I showered, dressed in comfortable travel clothes, and grabbed my suitcase. As I locked the door to my apartment, my phone illuminated the dark hallway. The screen showed an incoming call from Margaret. It was 4:45 in the morning. I let it ring, watching the missed call notification join a growing list of text messages. Beatrice had been texting since 4:30. Clara, you need to be at the house by 5:30 to start the turkey prep. Do not be late. Julian's parents are arriving early. I ignored the demands, picked up my luggage, and walked to my car. The streets of Nashville were empty and silent, blanketed in the quiet frost of a holiday morning. I drove toward the airport with the radio turned off, enjoying the absolute tranquility of my environment. By the time I reached the departure terminal and checked my bag, my phone was vibrating continuously. They were transitioning from annoyance to panic. Beatrice called again. This time, I swiped the green button and accepted the connection. Clara, where on earth are you? Beatrice's voice was shrill, cutting through the speaker like shattered glass. Mom is freaking out. The turkey isn't even in the oven yet, and the kids are waking up. You were supposed to be here 30 minutes ago. I stood near the security checkpoint, watching the digital departure board flash the details of my flight to Florida. I didn't flinch. I didn't offer an excuse. I am at the airport, I said, my voice completely flat, devoid of any sisterly warmth or submission. The line went dead silent for exactly 3 seconds. The airport? Beatrice repeated, her brain struggling to process a variable she hadn't accounted for in her meticulous spreadsheet. What are you talking about? Why are you at the airport? Get to the house right now. I am flying to street. Augustine, Florida, I stated, enunciating each word with clinical precision. I am taking a 2-week vacation. I will not be preparing your turkey. I will not be watching your children. My presence is no longer available for your consumption. Beatrice gasped, the sound a mix of outrage and pure shock. You cannot do this. You are ruining Christmas. We don't have a backup sitter. Julian and I have a gala tonight. We are relying on you. You cannot just leave. Her panic was a direct reflection of her own incompetence. I am not ruining anything, Beatrice. I am simply terminating my unpaid employment. The gifts are in the mail. Have a Merry Christmas. I didn't wait for her response. I ended the call and powered down my device, cutting the connection completely. The immediate cessation of her voice felt like a physical weight lifting from my shoulders. I turned and walked through the security gates. I wasn't running away from my family. I was walking purposefully toward my own life. Let the system they built on my back collapse under its own weight. I took my seat by the window as the airplane ascended through the clouds, leaving the freezing Nashville winter far behind. For the next 3 hours, I was completely unreachable, suspended in the sky while the consequences of my departure struck the ground below. When I landed in Florida and finally powered my phone back on, the influx of data was staggering. I had 84 unread text messages, 22 missed calls, and a string of frantic voicemails. I opened the group chat, scrolling through the digital wreckage of their perfect holiday. The narrative had shifted from anger to absolute pandemonium. Without my free labor, the logistical framework of their day had entirely disintegrated. Margaret was lamenting the ruined dinner, complaining that the turkey was frozen solid because no one knew how to prep it. Arthur was furious that his holiday relaxation was interrupted by screaming grandchildren. But the true financial and social impact was playing out between Beatrice and Julian. Without me to serve as their free, on-demand childcare, they were forced to secure a last-minute, holiday premium babysitter for their exclusive evening gala. Beatrice had texted a screenshot of an invoice to the group chat, complaining bitterly about the expense. The agency had charged them $3,500 for emergency holiday coverage. $3,500. That was the market value of the services I had been providing for free. But the audit was about to uncover an even deeper discrepancy. As I read the messages, Julian responded to the invoice screenshot with utter confusion. "Beatrice, why are we paying an emergency fee?" Julian wrote. "You told me 3 weeks ago that you had already booked and paid for a professional sitter for tonight. You said it cost $1,200. I remember transferring the funds to your account." The chat went completely silent. I sat on a bench near the baggage claim, watching the cursor blink. Beatrice had been caught embezzling from her own husband. She had told Julian she hired a sitter, taken the $1,200, and assigned the work to me for free, intending to pocket the cash. A moment later, Margaret chimed in. "Beatrice, what did you do with that money?" Beatrice's response was defensive and immediate. "I used it for my pre-holiday spa retreat. I knew Clara would do it for free. Why shouldn't I treat myself?" The group chat imploded. The facade of the perfect cooperative family was utterly shattered. Julian was furious about the theft and the deceit. Margaret and Arthur were horrified that Beatrice's selfishness had been exposed so blatantly. The mask of their flawless existence had slipped, revealing the greed and exploitation underneath. They weren't angry that I was missing. They were angry that my absence had forced them to face their own ugly reflections. I closed the application and slid the phone into my pocket. I didn't type a single word. I didn't need to interfere. The toxic system was devouring itself. I retrieved my suitcase from the carousel and stepped out into the warm, tropical Florida sunshine. My vacation had officially begun, subsidized by the peace of mind that comes from total detachment. 14 days later, I returned to Nashville. The Florida sun had cleared my mind, replacing the lingering fatigue of my past with a sharp, undeniable focus. I had not spoken to my family since the moment I boarded the plane. My silence was not a punishment. It was a boundary. When I pulled up to my parents' estate, their cars were all parked in the driveway. I knew they would be waiting for me. I walked through the front door, my posture straight, my expression composed. They were gathered in the living room. Margaret looked exhausted. Arthur appeared stern. Beatrice refused to make eye contact, while Julian looked remarkably humbled. I didn't offer a greeting. I walked directly to the mahogany coffee table in the center of the room and placed a single manila folder on the glass surface. "What is this?" Arthur demanded, attempting to assert his usual authority. "This is a final accounting of my services," I stated, my voice echoing clearly in the quiet room. I opened the folder. Inside was an itemized invoice. It detailed exactly 20 hours of unpaid labor I had provided over the past 2 years, including babysitting, event catering, and personal errands. I had calculated my time at standard market rates, adjusting for overtime and holiday premiums. Next to the invoice, I placed the printed screenshot of the $3,500 emergency childcare fee Beatrice had been forced to pay. "I am not asking for reimbursement," I explained, looking directly at my parents. "I am presenting this so you understand the exact financial value of the daughter you treated as disposable. For years, you outsourced your responsibilities to me and offered nothing but criticism in return. My transaction history with this family is now closed. Margaret opened her mouth to protest, her eyes welling with defensive tears. Clara, we are your family. You cannot put a price tag on love. I didn't put a price tag on it, I replied coldly. Beatrice did when she stole $1,200 from her husband and expected me to cover the labor for free. At the mention of the theft, Beatrice flushed a deep, ugly red. Before she could launch an attack, Julian stood up. He looked at Beatrice, then at my parents, and finally at me. Clara is right, Julian said, his voice heavy with resignation. Julian, do not encourage her, Arthur snapped. I am not encouraging her. I am taking responsibility, Julian shot back, stepping in front of his wife. We exploited you, Clara. Beatrice and I took advantage of your kindness, and Margaret and Arthur, you allowed it to happen because it was convenient for everyone. It was unacceptable. He turned to my parents, his expression unyielding. You owe Clara an apology. We all do. And until you can treat her with basic professional and personal respect, Beatrice and I will be stepping back from these family gatherings. The power dynamic flipped in an instant. My parents, desperate to maintain their relationship with Julian and their grandchildren, crumbled. Margaret looked down at her hands. I am sorry, Clara. We were wrong. Arthur nodded stiffly, his pride broken. The victory wasn't loud. It was absolute. I picked up my folder, turned on my heel, and walked out the door. The months that followed my return to Nashville were, without question, the most productive and liberating of my entire life. With the immense, chronic drain on my time and energy permanently severed, my career flourished in ways I had previously thought impossible. I consciously redirected the countless hours I used to spend managing my family's manufactured crises, running their errands, and absorbing their complaints, pouring all of that reclaimed focus directly into my own professional development. By early spring, I sat for my advanced editing certification exam, studying late into the evenings with a clear, unburdened mind, and passed with a flawless score. Within weeks of that milestone achievement, my firm awarded me a high-profile, complex remote project. That project was a resounding success, impressing the executive board, which quickly transitioned into a senior promotion and a substantial salary increase. I used the additional income to move into a much larger, brighter apartment across town, one featuring a dedicated home office overlooking the sweeping city skyline. I was no longer a silent, background character in my own existence. I was the undisputed executive director. My family attempted to reach out occasionally, tentatively navigating the strict new terms of our relationship. Julian sent polite, respectful messages every few weeks, genuinely checking in on my professional progress. Margaret mailed a birthday card that, for the first time in my 30 years of life, didn't include a single passive-aggressive demand, complaint, or guilt trip about my absence. Beatrice remained entirely silent, which was honestly the greatest gift she could have ever offered me. The boundaries I established held firmly in place, protected by the undeniable fact that I simply did not need their approval to survive. I had ruthlessly audited my life, removed the toxic deficits, and watched my emotional and financial margins soar. I want to take a moment to speak directly to anyone listening who understands exactly what this feels like. This is a letter to those of you who always feel on the fringes of your own families. I know the unique, bone-deep exhaustion of being the reliable one. I know the quiet, suffocating heartbreak of watching your hard-earned achievements be completely ignored while someone else's minimal efforts are wildly celebrated. You are taught from a young age to believe that your perpetual compliance is the rent you must pay to occupy a space in their lives. You are heavily conditioned to accept their mistreatment because society insists that blood is thicker than water. But let me tell you the undeniable objective truth. Your worth is not determined by your usefulness to people who stubbornly refuse to see your value. Your independence is not a betrayal. It is a fundamental, non-negotiable necessity. Stepping away from a toxic, exploitative family system is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of supreme self-preservation. You do not have to be the silent investor in a relationship that consistently bankrupts your spirit. You have the absolute right to close the account. You have the right to take your time, your love, and your energy. and invest it solely in your own future. When you finally stop trying to prove your worth to people committed to misunderstanding you, you free up the massive resources required to build a life that is genuinely your own. I've come to realize that holding on to anger is just another way of letting them occupy precious space in your mind. Forgiveness isn't always for the other person. Sometimes it's the only way to set yourself free. I forgive them for their limitations, but I will never again allow those limitations to restrict my potential. I am finally at peace. If this story resonated with you, drop a like, share it with someone who needs to hear this today, and subscribe for more stories on boundaries and self-worth. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to walk away to find your own peace?